The twin suns of Elthara rose slowly over the silver domes of the royal capital. Their light spilled through the translucent towers, painting the streets in golden warmth. In the palace courtyard, soldiers trained in quiet discipline, their sleek armor glinting like liquid glass. Eltharans were proud, graceful beings, tall, luminous, and born with psychic senses humans could only dream of. But among them, one figure stood out. He was not tall or luminous. His movements were heavier, slower. His armor, made of solid steel instead of crystal alloys, looked ancient beside Eltharan designs. His name was Eli Grant, a human from Earth, one of the few humans who had ever been allowed to live among the Eltharan people. Eli was not there as a guest. He was there as a protector, the personal guardian of Princess Lyra, daughter of Queen Solara, ruler of the Eltharan Empire. No one understood why the princess had chosen him. The queen had offered her the finest royal guards, soldiers trained since birth with psychic blades and energy shields. But Lyra had refused them all. She had chosen a human, an off-worlder, fragile and strange. With no psychic link and no royal blood, it had shocked the entire court. Yet, in 2 years, no one had dared question her decision aloud, until today. The morning began quietly. Princess Lyra stood by the garden balcony, watching the glowing birds fly above the crystal lake. She was dressed in flowing silver robes, her long blue hair tied with golden threads. Her eyes shimmered like the sky before rain. Behind her, Eli stood at attention, his expression calm. He wore a compact exosuit, military issue, old Earth technology. The armor hummed faintly, reading the air pressure and tracking energy signatures. "You don't have to stand like that all the time," Lyra said, glancing back with a small smile. "You can relax, Eli. No one will attack me in my own home." Eli gave a quiet chuckle. "That's what people always say until someone does." Lyra shook her head, amused. "You humans are always so cautious," he shrugged. "We don't have psychic senses like you do, Princess. We only have instincts, and instincts say to stay sharp." For a moment, Lyra's eyes softened. She liked that about him, his grounded, simple way of seeing the world. Among Eltharans, everything was about visions, destiny, and energy flows, but Eli lived in the present. He looked at things as they were. Their peace was interrupted when a servant hurried into the garden. "Your Highness," she said nervously, "the Queen requests your presence in the Grand Hall." Lyra frowned slightly. "Did she say why?" "No, Your Highness, but she also asked that your guardian be present." Lyra's heart sank. Her mother rarely summoned Eli. This wasn't going to be a casual conversation. The grand hall of the palace was vast and dazzling. Crystal pillars stretched high into the dome, glowing with the energy of the twin suns. At the far end, upon a throne of silver vines, sat Queen Solara, a figure of serene power. Her presence was calm but commanding, her gaze sharp as ice. When Lyra entered with Eli behind her, the courtiers whispered. Their shimmering robes rustled as they turned to watch the human who dared walk beside royalty. Queen Solara raised her hand, and silence filled the hall. "Daughter," she said, her voice soft yet strong. "You know why I've called you here." Lyra bowed slightly. "Mother, if this is about my guardian, it is about much more than that," the queen interrupted. "You are my heir. The people must trust your judgment. Yet they whisper of your attachment to this off-worlder." Lyra's voice grew firm. "Eli is my protector. He has never failed me." The queen's eyes narrowed. "He is human, a race known for fear and fragility. You would trust your life to someone who cannot even sense danger through energy?" Eli stood silently behind her, unflinching. He had been through worse than judgmental stares. Lyra lifted her chin. "Perhaps he cannot sense danger, Mother, but he faces it. That is why I trust him." The court murmured in surprise at her boldness. Queen Solara's expression remained unreadable. "You defend him with passion, my daughter. But passion is not wisdom. I have assigned you Elthara's finest guards. Why reject them?" Lyra's voice trembled slightly, but she stood her ground. "Because they protect me as an order. Eli protects me as a choice." The hall fell silent. Even the air seemed to pause. For a moment, the queen looked thoughtful. But before she could reply, a faint rumble shook the floor. The lights flickered. Then, without warning, the palace alarm blared. "Security breach," shouted a guard, rushing through the great doors. "An unidentified vessel has entered orbit. No response to hails." The courtiers panicked. The queen stood tall, commanding calm, but chaos rippled through the room. Eli's instincts flared. He touched his earpiece, scanning through his visor's display. Energy readings are unstable. Something's wrong with the outer defense grid. He turned sharply to Lyra. "Princess, step back now." Before anyone could react, a violent shockwave burst through the eastern wall. Crystal shards exploded across the hall. The light dimmed and a gust of burning air swept through. The royal guards raised their energy shields too slowly. Eli had already moved. He leapt forward, pulling Lyra down and covering her with his body. His armor absorbed most of the impact. Sparks flew from his shoulder plate. The noise was deafening, but Eli didn't move until the blast stopped. When silence fell again, the queen looked up in disbelief. Her daughter was safe, untouched beneath the human's protective stance. Guards scrambled to their feet, rushing to seal the breach. But the queen saw what no one else did. Eli hadn't hesitated. He hadn't waited for orders or fear. He had simply acted. Lyra looked up at him, shaken but safe. "Eli, are you hurt?" He shook his head, brushing off a crack in his armor. Nothing serious. His tone was steady, but the queen noticed his right arm trembling faintly. The blast had been powerful, yet he'd used himself as a shield without hesitation. Moments later, the security commander arrived, breathless. "Your Majesty, it was a stray satellite explosion in low orbit. No hostile intent detected." The queen nodded slowly. The danger had passed, but something inside her had changed. That evening, the palace returned to quiet. The hall was repaired, the courtiers dismissed. Only the queen, her daughter, and the human remained. Queen Solara walked toward Eli, studying him closely. Her eyes were sharp, but her tone was no longer cold. "You moved before anyone else," she said quietly. "Even before my guards." Eli bowed slightly. "With respect, Your Majesty, I don't wait for commands when someone I protect is in danger." "You risked your life," the queen said. "Why?" Eli hesitated for a moment. Then he spoke simply, "Because that's what humans do for those they care about. We don't always have strength or power or technology, but we have something else, will." The queen looked at him for a long moment, then turned to her daughter. "And this is the one you chose to guard you?" Lyra stepped forward, her voice soft but clear. "Yes, because when he says he'll protect me, he means it." Queen Solara exhaled slowly, her gaze moving between them. "You trust him completely, then?" "With my life," Lyra replied. The queen's expression softened, though only slightly. "Then perhaps I have misjudged your choice." She walked to the balcony, looking out at the stars. "For generations, we Elthorans have believed we were above other races. But today, I saw a human throw himself into fire without hesitation, while my guards stood still. That is not weakness. That is courage." Eli said nothing. He wasn't sure what to say to a queen. Lyra smiled faintly, stepping beside him. "Mother, now do you understand?" The queen turned, her eyes thoughtful. "Perhaps." She paused, then added softly, "Who protects you so fiercely, my daughter?" Lyra's eyes shone with quiet pride. "My human." That night, as the stars glimmered over the royal palace, Lyra stood by the balcony once more. The breeze was cool, carrying the scent of the glowing gardens below. Eli stood beside her, his armor repaired, his arm still sore but functional. "You could have been seriously hurt," Lyra said softly. Eli smiled. "I've been hurt worse. Besides, it's part of the job." Lyra turned to face him. "It's more than a job, isn't it?" He met her gaze, thoughtful. "Maybe. I guess I don't like seeing people afraid when I can do something about it." Lyra looked at him quietly for a moment. "You know, Elthorans believe courage comes from the mind, but I think you humans feel it from the heart." He chuckled softly. "That sounds about right." The silence between them was peaceful. Above, the twin suns had set, leaving only the shimmer of faraway stars, the same stars that once guided Eli from Earth. The following morning, the palace seemed calm again. The shattered walls had been repaired, the alarms silenced. Yet a quiet unease lingered in the air. The queen had seen something yesterday she could not forget, the sight of a human throwing himself into danger to protect her daughter. Queen Solara stood at the highest balcony of her tower, watching the distant stars fade into the bright sky. Her mind was full of questions. Why would someone so fragile do something so reckless? What made this human so loyal? She had ruled her empire for centuries, yet even she could not understand the human heart. Behind her, the faint sound of boots echoed. Eli Grant entered the balcony, standing at attention. His armor gleamed in the sunlight, newly repaired by Eltheran engineers. "You called for me, Your Majesty," he said quietly. Solara turned to face him. "I did. I owe you my gratitude. You saved my daughter's life without hesitation." Eli bowed slightly. "Thank you, Your Majesty. I was only doing my duty." The Queen studied him carefully. "Duty or something more?" He hesitated, unsure how to answer. "I don't know, ma'am. Maybe both." "Sit," she said gently, surprising him. Few ever sat in the Queen's presence. He obeyed, lowering himself onto a marble bench beside her. Solara looked at the horizon as she spoke. "When humans first came to Elthera, we thought of you as primitive. Your world had no psychic energy. Your bodies were weak, your lives short. But you have something else, something we seem to lack." Eli raised an eyebrow slightly. "What's that?" "Heart," the Queen replied softly. "A will that ignores reason. You act before thinking, sometimes foolishly, but often bravely." Eli smiled faintly. "That sounds about right for us." Solara turned to him, her tone more serious. "Tell me, Eli Grant, why do you protect my daughter so fiercely? You could have died yesterday." Eli took a breath, choosing his words carefully. "Because she once saved me." He looked out over the gardens as he spoke, his voice quiet but steady. 2 years ago, my ship crashed near the border of your empire. I was part of a diplomatic team from Earth, our first real contact with Elthara. Most of my crew didn't survive. I was barely alive when the rescue team found me. They were going to leave me behind. Said I wasn't worth the risk. The Queen frowned. "That sounds like soldiers, not saviors." Eli nodded. "Maybe. But then the princess arrived. She didn't even know who I was. Just another injured stranger. But she stayed with me, ordered her own guards to carry me through the storm. She wouldn't leave even when they said she should." He looked down at his hands. "When I woke up in the palace hospital, she was sitting there, waiting. She told me I was safe, and she smiled like it actually mattered." The Queen's eyes softened slightly. "And from that moment you swore loyalty?" Eli nodded. "Yeah, because back home not many people would do that. We live in a world where kindness costs too much, but she gave it freely. So I decided I'd protect that kindness no matter what." For a long moment the Queen said nothing. The twin suns rose higher, bathing them in warm gold. Finally she spoke quietly. "Perhaps I was wrong about you, human." Eli smiled faintly. "Wouldn't be the first time people were wrong about us." Later that day, Lyra joined them in the garden. She looked brighter, relieved that her mother and her guardian were finally speaking without tension. "Mother," she said, bowing slightly, "are you still angry about my choice?" The Queen smiled gently. "No, child. I see now that your choice came from wisdom, not rebellion. You saw something in this human that I did not." Lyra glanced at Eli, her eyes warm. "He saved me more than once." The Queen nodded slowly. "Then perhaps Elthara can learn something from humanity." Just as peace seemed to settle again, a messenger ran across the courtyard out of breath. "Your Majesty, an urgent message from the border station." The Queen stood tall. "Speak." "Unknown fleet approaching from the outer rings," the messenger said. "They are not Eltheran, and not human either." Eli's instincts tensed immediately. "How many ships?" 27, the messenger replied. "Large, armed, and moving fast." The Queen's calm cracked slightly. "Send word to the Defense Council. I will oversee the response." Eli stepped forward. "Permission to accompany the princess, Your Majesty. If this turns into conflict, she shouldn't be anywhere near the front lines." The Queen met his eyes and nodded. "Granted." Within an hour, the palace was alive with preparation. Energy shields activated, fleets mobilized, and Elthera's shimmering defense grid lit up like a second sunrise. Lyra stood in the observation chamber, watching the distant lights of the incoming fleet. Her hands trembled slightly. "Eli, do you think they'll attack?" "I don't know," he said honestly. "But if they do, we'll be ready." She turned to him, fear in her eyes. "You always say that. But aren't you afraid?" Eli looked out the window, watching the distant stars flicker. "Of course I'm afraid. But fear isn't a bad thing. It means you still have something to lose." Lyra was quiet for a moment. "You humans have such strange wisdom." He smiled softly. "It's all we've got." Suddenly, a bright flash lit up the sky. The outer defense satellites had fired warning shots. Moments later, a low rumble shook the chamber. "They've breached the shield," a voice shouted through the intercom. Eli grabbed Lyra's hand. "We need to move now." The corridors filled with alarms and rushing guards. The palace shook again, harder this time. Outside, glowing shapes streaked across the sky. The enemy fleet had begun firing energy pulses. Eli led Lyra through the service tunnels, his visor projecting a map of the safest exits. "Stay close, Princess. Don't stop no matter what." They emerged in a small hangar beneath the palace. The air was thick with smoke and static. 2 royal guards stood by a shuttle trying to power it up. "Status?" Eli called out. "Engines online, but shields are weak," one replied. "Good enough," Eli said. "We just need to get her clear." As Lyra boarded the shuttle, another explosion shook the hangar. Debris fell from the ceiling. One of the guards was pinned under a beam, shouting in pain. Eli moved instantly. "Get her out!" he yelled. Lyra cried out, "Eli, no!" But he had already rushed to help, lifting the heavy beam just enough for the guard to crawl free. His armor groaned under the strain, sparks flying from his exosuit servos. When the guard was safe, Eli turned to run, just as a second blast hit the hangar. The shockwave threw him back hard. "Eli!" Lyra screamed. He stumbled to his feet, armor cracked but alive. He forced a smile. "I'm okay, go." The shuttle lifted off as the hangar began to collapse. Through the viewport, Lyra could see him standing there, battered, alone, but still guarding the gate as if he could hold the whole world together with his will. Hours later, after the enemy fleet retreated and Elthara's defense ships secured the orbit, the palace lay in ruins but standing. The Queen herself led the recovery teams. When the smoke cleared, Eli was found alive amid the rubble, his armor shattered but his heartbeat strong. Lyra ran to him, tears in her eyes. "You promised you'd stay with me." Eli managed a weak grin. "Told you I don't break promises." The Queen knelt beside him, her regal composure gone. "You saved not only my daughter but my people. You are a human, yet you fought as though you were one of us." Eli chuckled softly. "Maybe we're not so different." The Queen smiled gently. "No, perhaps not." Weeks passed and Elthara slowly rebuilt. The alliance between Earth and Elthara grew stronger. The Queen personally honored Eli before the entire court, naming him the guardian of the Starborn throne, the first human ever to hold such a title. As the ceremony ended, Queen Solara looked at her daughter and asked with pride and emotion, "Who protects you so fiercely, my child?" Lyra smiled, her eyes shining. "My human." That night, after the celebrations, Lyra and Eli stood together on the palace balcony once more. The sky was clear, the stars bright and endless. "You really think peace will last this time?" Eli asked quietly. Lyra nodded. "Yes, because we finally understand each other. You humans fight with heart, not hate, and we needed to learn that." Eli looked out at the stars. "And maybe we needed to learn that courage doesn't come from muscles or machines. It comes from who you protect," she smiled softly. Then we both learned something. For a long moment they stood in silence. The world around them glowed with the gentle hum of peace. Eli glanced at her, his voice quiet. "You know, back on Earth we have a saying. The stars look brighter when you have someone worth protecting." Lyra looked up at the same stars, her eyes warm. "Then I hope they never stop shining."